This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Happy Friday. Thanks for listening. Recruiting, transfer portal, all of those things we're going to talk about on both football and basketball as we wrap up our 5 for 5 week of podcasts in our return. But first, got to remind you guys, we are presented by our friends at StatusJet, statusjet.com. Reach out to David Henry and his team. They work round the clock to ensure that your private jet charter experience is grade A. From point A to point B, they can handle everything you need when it comes to that experience. Big jet, small jet, helicopter, whether you're flying with family, friends, business associates, they can hook it up for you guys. And that's why we partnered with them, but also why SMU has partnered with them. They're proud supporters of SMU athletics. They're handling everything for you when you go through this experience. It's not just about the flight. It's about crafting that perfect airborne experience, ensuring you arrive inspired and ready for whatever adventure awaits you on the other side of that flight. If you mention the code PonyUpACC or on theponyexpress.com, you get a discount on a round trip flight with StatusJet. So reach out to them today and start planning your next adventure with StatusJet. Let's jump in now to the latest on SMU recruiting, both in the high school ranks and the transfer portal. A lot has happened both in basketball and football over the last couple of weeks as we've been monitoring the high school recruiting and transfer portal opening up in both sports. And we're going to lead off with the football side of things. I know basketball has seen a lot of change over the last really week and days as Andy Enfield and his staff have gone to work. But football needs some tidying up over the last couple of weeks because SMU did pick up a commitment while we were on our little hiatus from the podcast. And we're going to address that as well as the status of this class of 2025 before jumping into the transfer portal and kind of the latest on that. But let's lead off with the biggest prospect that SMU has committed in the class of 2025, and that is Duncanville quarterback Keelon Russell. He just made a move up into the top 100 overall prospects, 4-on-3, now the 81st ranked prospect in the country, top 10 quarterback nationally. Other programs haven't stopped coming after him. He's won back-to-back state championships now as a starter. He put up monster numbers as a junior. And at the Under Armour Dallas camp, he won quarterback MVP honors. He's looking like really a prospect that could rise up even into a 5-star rating this season if he has another strong season, which we're certainly expecting him to do just that. And over the last couple of weeks, he's visited Texas A&M. He's supposed to visit Texas this weekend. He's got some other suitors that are still turning up the heat there on him. But let's assess where things stand here. Keelon Russell committed early on in his junior season to SMU. And since then, he's seen other schools take a much stronger look at him. Florida, Ole Miss, Oregon, and others are looking at him. The in-state schools, Texas A&M and Texas, both have quarterbacks committed. And Texas A&M, and we told you this if you're an On the Pony Express subscriber, Texas A&M was in the running for Hassan Longstreet, another 4-star quarterback. They got him over the weekend, which was big news. The Aggies, from what I'm hearing, aren't expected to take a second quarterback. And Texas is open to the idea of taking 2 quarterbacks. Here's the thing. I don't think Keelon Russell is afraid of competition. You look up and down kind of this list of schools that are still in the mix for him as far as his recruitment goes. You look at Oregon, they've already got a commitment in Achilles Smith Jr., a legacy there for the Ducks, is another highly thought of passer. Florida signed DJ Lagway, a 5-star quarterback last cycle. And Ole Miss has really just gone about loading up that quarterback room just about every year with transfers. So Lane Kiffin not opposed to adding competition in that room. But if I'm Keelon Russell and just kind of from conversations I've had with multiple people kind of across the industry and then a little bit with Keelon, he's not afraid of the competition. But at the end of the day, there's also programs that are saying, hey, we want you to be our guy in this class, our quarterback. Florida, which still doesn't have a quarterback commitment, is wanting to do that. Ole Miss is wanting to do that, I believe. SMU, of course, is wanting to do that. And I think for SMU, the biggest thing is getting him obviously back on campus for that official visit in May. It's going to be a monster recruiting weekend for the Mustangs, to have so many prospects and targets and commits on campus. And if they can just survive what's left of this run of visits, there's a chance that SMU can hang on to him. And if they can get him to that official visit, you got to feel pretty good about keeping him in the boat. Florida is expected to host him for an official visit. Ole Miss is going to host him next weekend for a visit, from what he told us. So those are two schools to certainly keep an eye on, as Texas is also looking at him and bringing him in for a visit. The biggest thing for Keelon he's going to have to weigh is, do I go to a program with two quarterbacks committed that might be, quote unquote, a bigger stage, like a Texas A&M? Those are schools that it's tough to argue that playing at a Kyle Field or playing at DKR, I mean, that environment, it's just a little bit bigger, and both are in the SEC. Florida, kind of a similar story there, but he's already passed on playing for Ole Miss when he committed earlier this fall to SMU. So there's still a period of time where SMU's not out of the woods with Keelon Russell, potentially looking to go elsewhere. But if you're SMU right now, with the news of Texas A&M taking Hassan Longstreet, you're feeling a lot better about that. And quite honestly, if Texas can hold on to KJ Lacey, I don't necessarily know if the Longhorns take two quarterbacks, which could be good news for SMU. And at the same time, all of these schools are pressing. Let's not discount the work that Derek King, Rhett Lashley, and the staff have done to try and keep Keelon Russell committed. They've continued to make him a priority. They had him on campus for the spring game, which is big. And I felt like if he made that trip down to Texas A&M and opted to just not go to SMU spring game the night before that trip, and maybe even went to College Station a little early for that visit, then you're looking at it where, okay, he's gone throughout spring without really being on SMU's campus for a practice. For him to come through the spring game, be on campus, get time with the staff, that was really important, just to continue to get him around this coaching staff, see how Derek King coaches up his room. And so they keep the pedal down in regards to that. Plus, SMU, I think they're going to start dabbling in the NIL space when it comes to the high school ranks. And when you're trying to sign a top 100 quarterback nationally, you're talking a pretty penny for these guys that they're going to command on the open market. And SMU is now going to start shifting some of its focus to the high school ranks and acquiring top prospects, because that's ultimately what Rhett Lashley and the staff want to do. When he came in, they had to rebuild the roster. They went transfer heavy. They did it again ahead of the 2023 season, and it paid off. Now you have a team that is stockpiled some talent, but you now want to build the next wave through the high school ranks. They've had to go out and address certain positions through the transfer portal, but they do want to do it primarily going forward, especially with the Power 4 logo and the ACC on their chest, through the high school ranks. So that'll be something to watch moving forward. But Keelon heavy to start this podcast, but he is the biggest storyline in this class of 2025. So wanted to catch you guys up on where things stand there. With SMU's class of 2025, it does still rank in the top 25 overall classes in the country. A good thing for the Mustangs moving forward, as like we said, they want to build through the high school ranks with the talent. They've got Dalen Singleton. All of these prospects in state will be on campus for their official visit May 17th. They will have some other guys come in this summer as their schedule allows, like Cameron Cullens, who's out of Georgia. He's their defensive line commit. But SMU did add another commitment from the Peach State while we were away, and that is Jalen Shivers, who, if you saw the picture that we posted at ontheponyexpress.com, is he not like a Elijah Roberts lookalike as a young prospect? Tall, long, athletic looking, but room to add to his frame And he's somebody that Calvin Thibodeau really prioritized over the last really few weeks and months, turning up the heat on another Georgia prospect and getting him on board. Once again, similar to Cameron Cullens, kind of a sleeper in terms of the offer world. But as teams get out to see him in the spring and get out to see him in the fall, I think he's going to pick up more offers, just like Cameron Cullens did, who picked up a Washington offer and had a couple of other Power 5 offers as well. I think they're doing right by this program by acquiring guys that look like this. He really does look like somebody who's going to slide right into that Elijah Roberts role at some point. And that's exactly what they pitched him on, being able to play kind of up and down the line a little bit. He's not being pitched as a bandit. I think once we get his measurables updated and our rankings team gets a look at him, he'll be ranked as a true defensive lineman and he'll play that strong side defensive end spot. But Jalen Shivers did commit to the Mustangs after his spring game, and they made the trek in a Ford F-150 across the country to get to SMU for this visit. They spent almost a week at SMU. That's how interested they were in what Calvin Thibodeau was selling. And sure enough, it led to a commitment for the Mustangs. So they now sit with the 20th ranked class in the country, and it is the month of April. It's still early in the cycle, don't get me wrong, but they're holding firm, just chipping away at a top 25 class here pretty quietly, too, in a way. They are fourth in the ACC as well. They have, I believe, 8 commitments on board right now, and they are looking to add more as the official visit season approaches for us as SMU gets ready for that month of May, which will feature that big May 17th official visit weekend. So if you want the latest on SMU recruiting, subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com for just $1 for your first 2 months using code SMU1. That's SMU, the number 1, when you check out for that subscription. Just takes a couple seconds to subscribe. You get the intel on who SMU's recruiting, their chances, and where especially they're targeting in the transfer portal. If you use that code, you're covered through the official visit season, really, for SMU, which is that fun time of year where we really get to see this class come together. They've done a nice job doing early recruiting, getting 8 commitments on board already. Some positions pretty close to done already, like the safety spot, but they do have a large group coming in those 2 weekends in May, particularly May 17th, that you're not going to want to miss. Could lead to some commitments in this class really stacking up some talent. So we'll be there to follow it for you every step of the way. On the transfer portal front for SMU football, haven't seen a commitment since the transfer portal window opened. They do have Matthew Hibner, who we talked about on Monday, in terms of being the tight end that they're bringing in for that position to kind of shore it up. We did see some players enter the portal for SMU this week. We did see Jaden Jones enter the portal. We saw Brian Massey enter the portal, and Lonnie Johnson, who we mentioned at the end of our Thursday podcast, the tight end who spent just 1 season at SMU, entering the portal. They do have some spots to play with. And what are the priorities? Well, we've talked a lot about it. We've talked about offensive tackle being a major piece. We've talked about corner. We know that they want to add a young safety to that mix of really a veteran bunch. They know in 2025, they could be very young and inexperienced at that position. They want to address it as best they can. And that's why they're, in all likelihood, going to bring in a young safety. And we just dropped some intel on a Pac-12 transfer, another former Dallas area standout who is headed to SMU for an official visit. So again, if you want another reason to subscribe, there it is. And we'll be tracking that one very closely as SMU looks to get him on board this weekend. Now, what's next after that? I mentioned the offensive tackle spot. That is paramount that SMU addresses that spot. And Rhett Lashley did a radio interview earlier this weekend. He talked up PJ Williams and he talked up Savion Byrd. There's no question about that. You know, they're high on what they bring to the table, but they need to bring in more talent at that position. Andrew Chamblee, the Arkansas offensive tackle transfer, we talked about him. They did go in home. They did offer him. He does have some visits lined up. But SMU, and I've said this, SMU is quietly working on a big offensive tackle. We'll see if it comes to fruition. But look, the Mustangs need to address that spot along with the cornerback spot and the defensive tackle spot, they'll keep chipping away at those, and then they're always open to a best available. So that's the latest on SMU football. Before we get into SMU basketball and kind of the quickly evolving situation with SMU basketball, and as Andy Enfield sinks his teeth into this job, we got to remind you guys, Status Jet is there for you guys on all of your charter jet needs. There are so many destinations as the summer approaches that are difficult to get to, or maybe just are that long trip and you don't want to be exhausted from flying coach or even first class all the way across the world to get there. And that's why it might make sense for you to look into Status Jet. They can book you a jet where you can have some room, you can have your own space to really enjoy what a private jet experience could look like. And that's where our friends at Status Jet, and using that code PonyUpACC for a round trip flight might make sense for you, your family, your friends, and even if it's a business trip, maybe write it off. Reach out to Status Jet today and plan your trip with them. Go to statusjet.com. SMU basketball, kind of this interesting situation they're in just a few weeks into the Andy Enfield era. Look, we've talked about the transfer portal and how you can never really count out something happening. And over the last couple of weeks that Andy Enfield and his staff have been on the job, they've worked to keep Zurich Phelps, Chuck Harris, some other players on this roster. And on Thursday, it was kind of a run of bad news for SMU basketball when it came to targets and departures for the team. When Mo and Jai left, when Xavier Foster left, nobody really blinked an eye. Samuel Williamson graduating, Tyreek Smith probably moving on in all likelihood to the professional ranks from what we've heard. There are open scholarships to play with on this roster. And as it stands now, 5, if Tyreek Smith does indeed end up playing professionally and moving on. And actually, now that I'm recording this, Denver Anglin has entered the portal. And this is one that I would say doesn't surprise me at all. He redshirted. I think that paved the way for him to make his move into the portal, whether Rob Lanier was still here or not, quite frankly, because he just seemed over the first 2 years of college basketball, he wasn't really going to be able to piece it together. He was going to have to drop down a level to play. And so now Denver Anglin's moved on. So that makes six now scholarships that SMU will have to play with in this recruiting cycle. So let's assess first and foremost what happened with Zurich Phelps. He has 1 year of eligibility remaining. Ricardo Wright also joining him on Thursday, entering the portal. And I think for me, and I spoke with people in Zurich's camp, no one had heard from Zurich himself that he was coming back. There was a lot of feeling that Andy Enfield's presentation to him might have made enough sense for Zurich to say, okay, I'm going to ride out a third coach. I'm going to play out this final year of eligibility in this program and try to lead them into the ACC in the right direction. I think this is a situation where it probably isn't a bad thing for him to get a fresh start. He's put a lot into SMU. He's been criticized, in my opinion, way too much for what he's had to play with throughout his career, especially the last 2 seasons of not really having a great group around him. And SMU made a change at the helm of the basketball program, in part because of coaching and offensively what this team has looked like the last 2 seasons. I mean, it's hard for me to go as deep in on Zurich Phelps being an issue for this team when so many people sit there and say, well, there's no offensive scheme, there's no offensive flow, all of those things for SMU basketball. And it's true. We didn't see any of that. We saw a lot of improvement defensively, but not much offensively outside of adding a couple of talented pieces that just kind of produced a little bit better. So for Zurich Phelps, he's charting his new course for his final year of eligibility. He's going to be a highly sought-after guard in the transfer portal. He's going to go somewhere and probably have success. And I wish him the best. I think he got way too much criticism. He didn't play up to what I think his potential was by any means, but a guy who ultimately leaves as one of the better SMU guards in the last decade, if you really want to think about it, but just was at a time in the program that it wasn't, the program didn't get the attention it deserved. Let's be real. And now with the Andy Enfield era and the investments that SMU is making in the program to win big with Andy Enfield at the helm, maybe it will be on that track, but it wasn't with the leadership that it had over the last couple of seasons. So Zurich Phelps, Ricardo Wright, now Denver Anglin move on. SMU now has 6 scholarships to play with. They've hosted some visitors. Jacoby Coles from TCU committed to Grand Canyon, which somebody made a great point that he can basically go to online school only and play at Grand Canyon and be assured an NCAA tournament berth. But at the end of the day, they do have some options still out there. They missed on Drew Thelwell, the Morehead State transfer who committed to Iowa this week. SMU has to find a way to upgrade this roster. But here's the main point that I want to make about where this entire transfer portal window and situation stands. There is so much time. Look at the players that are still going in. There are former top 20 recruits going in. There are starters from other teams and programs going into the portal today, yesterday. This isn't like football where it's a quick window. It is a 45-day window that stretches for another week and a half for players to enter. And then you can start recruiting them too, even if they enter on the last day. So there's time for this roster to be addressed, both in the high school ranks and the transfer portal ranks. The question people want to know is, where's the talent coming from? Who are their targets? And let me tell you guys, it is just one of those moments in the last couple of days where we went from, okay, they brought in Jacoby Coles. They had Malik Dia in very early on. They were going to bring in Drew Thelwell. They backed off Frankie Collins. They made some different decisions because they thought, hey, Zurich Phelps is kind of giving us indications he's going to stay. Ricardo Wright, he could have been the last guard in the lineup for SMU. And that, if they addressed things the right way, would have been perfect, quite frankly, heading into next season. But things change with the transfer portal so quickly. So now instead of retaining, like Andy Enfield and his staff probably hoped to, now you're looking at building, and you can let it fly a little bit more. They didn't have many scholarships to play with. So in the ever-evolving world that involves the transfer portal, the plans are shifting now. And so I'm very intrigued to see where they go. But there is talent that keeps going in, and there's talent that's still out there to address it. We might not just hear about it left and right, but they did reach out to a new transfer portal player that has entered, and one that I'm familiar with as a high-level recruit coming out of high school, and that's Johan Traore, who left UC Santa Barbara. And I know people are probably saying, wow, UC Santa Barbara, really? But he started his career at Auburn, very highly thought of player coming out of high school, and SMU did reach out to him. I don't know if that results in a visit. We will see, but he is a true big man, 6'10", 225, and started his career at Auburn. He didn't, he played a good bit for the Tigers early on. He averaged 14.5 points per game this season. He started all 30 games, averaged 29 minutes. He really spent his second season in a much better place. Obviously dropped down a level, but he has been able to kind of get things back on track. He was a former top 25 prospect. He's a number one player in Arizona coming out of high school. And so he's now on the radar for SMU. We'll continue to monitor if anything develops between him and the Mustangs. Brody Kozlowski did trim his list. He's the 4-star small forward out of Utah that SMU head coach Andy Enfield did sign at USC. He backed off of that signing with the Trojans and has now whittled his list down, including SMU in his top list of schools, along with BYU, where he is expected to visit this weekend. We'll see how that goes. He's a legacy for BYU, who just hired Kevin Young as their new head coach away from the Suns, where he's an assistant coach. SMU made his top 5 along with Nevada, Stanford, and Cal. Again, 4-star prospect with some of the departures and of Sam Williamson. You've got to think SMU would love to get him, and we'll continue to track him rather closely. But look, and I've said this on the board, people want to see, they want to see the finished product now. And they want to see everything happen, and they want to know all the things. But this is a new coaching staff. This is a new round of people that are involved completely with this program. And they're going to do it certainly their own way. And it might not be at this time as public because they are moving on the players that they feel like need to be a part of the program. And they're trying to bring them in. And it's just a wild stretch run. They've moved to Dallas, all those things. So people want information. People want to know. And it's just not always going to come in droves like it did heading into last weekend, where we knew Jacoby Coles was on campus. We knew Brody Kozlowski was on campus. At the time, Drew Thelwell was going to visit. We knew that they had backed off Frankie Collins. Now it's in a much more of a, okay, we'll see obviously what happens with Brody Kozlowski. He's a top target. Now that they've missed on a Drew Thelwell, they can maybe pursue Trent Perry a little bit more, the top 100 prospect who signed with USC, who's set to visit Virginia this weekend. There's a lot more room to play with. There's a lot more scholarships to offer and flexibility for this staff. But I don't know where the next commitment's coming from. I don't know who they're going to get on board. I know they feel like they left a good impression with Brody Kozlowski. That's the big thing right now. And some of the staff was even overseas scouting some players this week. So they're putting, their miles out there, miles on their credit cards to try and scout and meet with players. And I'm sure they're lining up some visits. We just right now haven't seen anything become public just yet for this weekend, as Andy Enfield and his staff now have 6 scholarships to play with. So we'll be watching it very closely. And one quick note I'll pass along as well. Chance Puryear, the SMU signee, did get in contact with me this week and said he's excited to stay at SMU and learn more about Andy Enfield, but he is sticking with his signing. So he's another piece to the puzzle for SMU. And he's already counted in the amount of scholarships that I'm mentioning in terms of scholarships to play with for this staff. So we'll be keeping a close eye on what's next for this program as they start to build out their roster for the 2023-2024 season, or 2024-2025 season. But let me reiterate it one more time. It is so early in the process for this transfer portal window. There's still a week and a half for guys to enter. And according to our transfer portal staff, and this was yesterday, but I'll look right now for you guys in terms of who is committed and how many players are still out there. But there are 14.8% of players in the transfer portal, which is almost 1,000 right now, that are committed. So there's a lot of talent out there for Andy Enfield and his staff to go after and get on campus and try to bring in. And there's still some high school players out there as well that they're recruiting. So we'll keep a close eye on where it goes for SMU basketball. Again, subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com for just $1 for 2 months using code SMU1. That's SMU, the number 1. Appreciate you guys for listening to this podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed this week of pods. We'll kind of get back to a more, couple times, maybe 3 times a week podcast for you guys. But of course, we'll have it all covered for you daily at ontheponyexpress.com, part of the On3 network. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the On the Pony Express podcast.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMUOn3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.